Good evening, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the painting studio. I'm not painting, I just finished that hinge shoveler, but I wanted to start a new project. And before I do another waterfowl species, I wanted to, in honor of the coming Christmas season, I got the wild idea, and my wife and I were talking about it, of doing a Christmas tree ornament, songbird. And as I get older, I've developed new appreciation for songbirds along with waterfowl. So forgive me for that, for those of you that are looking for another duck-related video. But last Christmas, my kids got me one of those bird feeders that have a digital camera on it. And I've just been having a lot of fun getting close-ups of, I think it's up to 30 different varieties of birds we've had on the feeder. And I thought it would be fun for a change of pace to try my hand at a miniature Christmas tree ornament in honor of the season and give that a shot. And so I've got a picture of a black-capped chickadee from the feeder. I have a good profile there. I want to create a pattern. Just go with the flow here, and hopefully you'll humor me with this. But I think it could be a lot of fun, and it's a different challenge, and I think that's healthy to mix it up and keep it interesting. So those of you that love songbirds and birds of all types, not just waterfowl, might learn something as I stumble my way through creating this miniature black-capped chickadee Christmas ornament. So let's bring the camera in. I want to create a pattern. We'll talk about how I'm going to go about doing that, and then we'll go from there. Welcome back. This is the picture from the bird feeder, and a nice profile shot, a lively shot. Not the greatest clarity on that particular day, but I think clear enough to create a pattern. So I'm pulling that up on my computer, and this is not a touchscreen computer, which is helpful when you're developing a pattern using the computer. I'm going to use some tracing paper. I'm going to get this sized to the size I'm looking for, which I think we've talked a little bit about it, and I think 3.5 to 4 inches, which is about right where I have this. And I can pull this slider up here to make it larger, smaller, but I think I want it right in that 3.5 to 4 inch range from the tip of the bill to the tip of the tail. So 3 3/4. That's what I'm going to go with. The eyes at that size look like they're about 2 millimeter. So I'm going to have to get some black glass eyes, and I just looked on Amazon. I can get those very inexpensively. So let's get going on the pattern development. All right, I've got my tracing paper. I've got the lights out so it's easier to see. And this is very small scale. Got a nice sharp pencil. So I'm going to go through and trace. I'm not going to put feet on the bird since it's going to be a hanging ornament. But I'll go ahead and get this traced and get the eye positioned there. That tail may be a little long proportionally. We'll see. So I'll get that traced and then come back. All right, so I made that tracing and just fleshed it out a little bit just so I could get a feel for the colors and the feather patterns. And then I dropped with a triangle some verticals from critical points like the tip of the bill, the back of the bill or beak, the eyes, the tail locations, etc. And then I'm really winging it on the top-down pattern. I don't have a lot of reference on that, and this is not going to be judged other than on a Christmas tree. So I'm making the body roughly 1 inch round, and then just kind of figured out roughly the shape of the body, and I'm going to go with that. I may make this a little more full. Because of this up in that location. All right, I'll make a pattern out of those and then we'll see if we can cut it out. I've got some cardstock and I just flipped the tracing paper over. And now I'll go from the back side and retrace to transfer that to the cardboard. I'll have to do more study on the wing details and the tertials and how these feathers lay in, but I'm just kind of penciling some things in to get a start. So I'll go ahead and get this traced to make my pattern, and then we'll get something cut out. Now that those are traced, they've transferred to the cardstock, and I'll go ahead and re-pencil that in to sharpen things up and then cut those out with scissors. All right, pattern's made, and I'm right at that 3.5 inches long, looks like. After laying these out on a piece of wood, I thought this was just a little too small at 3 5/8, so I came up with this 4.25 inch pattern, a little larger, same pattern, just sized up, same process, and that's what I'm going to use for the carving. All right, I've got my pattern laid out on a nice light piece of Tupelo, and I'm going to go old school here and use a coping saw because I don't have a reliable jigsaw, which would probably be a better choice. I've got the pattern on both sides so that I can keep an eye on squareness as I cut through. So I'll get this cut out and then we'll do the top-down profile. And be careful around the bill or the beak here. Left a little extra wood there. Now I put the top scrap piece back on, and I've got the bottom piece clamped on there as well to kind of sandwich those in the vise. And very carefully, I'm going to cut this top-down profile. So I'll get that cut out and come back. All right, now we can start carving. Pretty small piece to hang on to while I'm carving, so I'm going to make a little handle, and I don't have one, but I've got an old paintbrush handle that I cut off. I'm going to drill a hole in it and embed this screw in there so that I can use that as a handle in the bottom of the bird. So I'll get that done. Just going to cut the head off this screw with a hacksaw. Just mixing up a little two-part epoxy with the end of the screw then. And go ahead and put that in the end here and make sure there's good epoxy around there. I chose a larger screw because I don't want to risk this spinning off while I'm grinding. So I'd rather have a little larger hole to deal with underneath, and that'll be easy to take care of in a smoothie bird like this. So I'll let that set and we'll be ready to go. I just thought I'd include this because it's handy to have something like this for small work. All right, I've got my carving handle attached. That's going to work out nice, and it's nice and firm, so the bird's not going to move around on me. I've got kind of the wing position penciled in here and the tips, kind of where the head comes back into the cape here. And other than that, that's all the guideline I'm going to use, and just kind of round things up, rough shape now, using a little burr, cone-shaped burr. So I'll get suited up for that and we'll get carving. I've got this at 2x speed, just so you're aware, and I'm going to use this burr and just carefully remove wood and round the body of the bird. And I'm just going at this slowly. Again, this is at 2x speed. I always mention with these burrs, you have to be careful and go slowly. They cut wood well, but if you pull them against the grain, they can chatter and jump around, and you just need to be safe with these. So I've got the body half generally rounded there. Get the other half. Cut in that neck as it meets the cape. The bird is in kind of a tucked head position, so there's not much of a neck on this little bird. Now I'm going to take the tail down a little bit. I left, maybe 3/16 thickness on the tail so that I can do a little bit of detailed carving on the tail later. So I'm just beveling that from the center line down to the edge, and then using the tip of the burr to begin to define the primary feather groups there. Now I'm going to go ahead and round the head. I'm not going to use the burr much on the beak because there's not much material to work with here, and I don't want to make a mistake and zip off the beak. So I'm just keeping a light touch up around that area. And I left additional wood around that beak profile so that I've got wood to carve with there. Now I'm going to use this 1/2 inch sanding drum with 150 grit paper. And it's actually not paper, it's Swiss sanding material. So it's kind of grit on a cloth. Nice and durable. And I'm just using this 1/2 inch drum to go ahead and round things up, remove the burr marks, and I am going to start to shape the bill a little bit with the sanding drum here, because I can be very careful so I don't take off too much material, but begin to point that beak up so that we can detail it later. Get all the coping saw marks off the bottom here. Round the belly. I'll have to do some final sanding with the handle out of the way later, but right now this is just rough shaping. So I'll finish that up and then we'll take a look. All right, I've got the bird rough rounded and sanded to begin with, and now I want to begin defining the beak. And I'm going to go to my pattern, get a dimension from the tip to where it meets the face here. Very small beak on this bird, so it's going to be kind of meticulous detail at this scale, but that'll give me a guideline. And then where it meets the crown up here, just want to give myself a little bit of a guideline there as well for length. So we've got to do some carving here to narrow the bill up, because or the beak. I'm used to saying bill because I normally do waterfowl. The beak. And I need to narrow that up a bit. It's too fat from the top down. And I've got a target there. I'm going to reestablish a center line here before I move on. I'm going to use this very small cylindrical ruby and begin to define the bill. And I'm running this at 2 times speed so that we can get through the video a little quicker. But that way I can show you all of the video and not just pieces here and there. So I'm using the guidelines that I put in place to define the beak and then round the cheeks into that more narrow beak. And I'm taking wood off top and bottom too, because I left additional wood to keep plenty of wood around this area from the pattern. So I'm going to keep checking my pattern so that I get this beak down to size, but I'm doing it very slowly, again, because a little slip here could take the whole thing off. So now I'm working on the sides to narrow it from the top down profile. Taking a little off the bottom mandible there. And again, rounding into the face then once I establish the more narrow dimension. It comes up to a point at the top, and this little beak on the reference is just kind of poking out of a lot of loose feathering in the front here. Now I've got it down to size. I'm going to separate the upper and lower portions of the beak, and just with my little ruby cylinder put a groove in there to separate those. And that's about all the detail I'm going to put on this. I'll do some sanding, get everything smoothed out. I will put some nostrils in a little bit later. Now I just use my embossing tool to just press a little nostril opening right up next to the face. Next, I want to form a little eye channel here and carve that in so that the eye will be inset somewhat to the head. These don't need to be very deep, it doesn't look like, but let's carve those in. I'm going to use this little cone-shaped ruby bit and go ahead and grind in an eye channel and then round that up and down both directions. And again, from the reference I have, this doesn't have to be very deep, and we don't have to narrow the crown much. The head is kind of rounded from the front, but we want a little definition here to inset the eyes, cast a little bit of a shadow there. Now I'll carefully use my sanding drum and smooth everything out. Kind of finish shaping those grooves with the edge of the drum. And keep this nice and soft. I want to go a little bit deeper, just so we have a little bit more definition. Make sure they're level, and then I'll finish up with some sandpaper. The other tool I'll use here is this little pin vise with a ruby bit in the end of it, just a ball bit. And it works really well for getting into areas like this, finalizing the shape and smoothing things out. So I'll work this for a while, then do some hand sanding. Then we can look at installing the eyes. Now I'm just getting a dimension from the back of the beak here to the front of the eye and transferring that to the wood on either side. And that's the front of the eye, and I've got a little ball ruby bit here, and I'm going to create an eye opening on either side. Make sure those look level. And then I bought some little black glass eyes. This kit contains 2, 3, and 4 millimeter glass black eyes, and that's perfect for this purpose. So I'm going to embed those in the holes that I just created, and they come on a little stem, so I'll probably clip those off, leave a little stem there so I can press them in place. And we're not going to need a lot of filler. I'll just epoxy those in place. Okay, I haven't done this before, so if it doesn't work, I'm sorry. I've got a little piece of wire, my 2-part epoxy, and I'm just filling up the eye channel with that. I've got these eyes clipped off, so I'm going to put the stem to the back, and then I don't want to scratch the eye, so I've got a little tongue depressor, and I'm going to press that in place. Wipe off the excess glue. That actually looks pretty good. I'll do the same thing on the other side and make sure they're lined up. Since these are glass, I can use my X-Acto later to clean things up. But that looks pretty good. I'll get the other side done quickly. Put the stem to the back. So it kind of helps locate the eye, and it'll give us an anchor point as well. I'll partially push that in to get that started, and then use the piece of wood so I don't scratch the eye. I need to press that in a little farther. Those look pretty good from the front, amazingly. I still need to press this one in a little bit more. And I don't want to go too deep, and I don't want to mark the face either, since this is soft Tupelo. That looks better. All right, the eyes are set. Yay! By the way, in case someone's interested, these are TOAOB eyes. And I just found these on Amazon. You get like 300 eyes for $9, so they're gonna last forever. In 3 different sizes. Not trying to sell those, just in case somebody was interested. There are lots of options for that type of black glass eye on the internet. Use my pattern here to kind of get a location on these from the belly, roughly in that position. Comes down to about there. So that's going to come from the primaries up here and kind of fade out in that area. Same here from the primaries down. And it's going to fade into these. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around into these overlapping feathers here. So I want to establish where that line is. I'll get that on here, get the feathers laid out, and come back. All right, I've got those sketched in, and with a little bit of the primary feathers out here on both sides. Now we'll do a little bit of carving to define those and call it good on that part of the body. Okay, I'm going to use this little 1/8 inch diameter ruby, and I've got this at 2 times speed, again, just so we can get through it pretty quickly. And I'm using the edge of that ruby to begin to define these feathers and the groups of feathers. So I'm using the edge to kind of define the feathers, and then using the side of the ruby to remove material. Now I'm working on the tertials, get those defined, and again use the side of the bit then to make layers so the feathers look like they're stacked on top of each other. A little better view here. You can see I'm just working to define those, get the primaries defined. And this will take some time to get everything smoothed out, but pretty quick work of defining those feather groups, so you can begin to see those emerge from the wood here. Now I'm just going back to clean things up after just making an initial pass to follow my pencil guidelines. I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. All right, I've got those pretty well shaped up. And I've got some more sanding to do, but I want to carve a few tail feathers in, and then we'll call it good. All right, I'm not trying to get all the tail feathers on here, but carve in a few. And I'm just using my knife to score the outside edge of each, so we can get a nice clean line carving. I'll get those scored and then we'll carve. I'll use that 1/8 inch cylindrical bit again, and very similar to what we did on the other feathers, although this time I'm following my knife guidelines and just taking material down so that we step down these tail feathers and they appear layered. There you can begin to see that in the shadows in the light. So I'll work that for a while and then come back. Now I'm going to use my pin vise with a little flame-shaped ruby bit, and I can really go in and define these feather edges, clean things up, including the feather tips here that I couldn't get with the grinder. This is almost embossing as well as sanding and shaping. Now that the carving is done, I'm just backing the screw out so that I can finish up the belly area here, sand, and when I paint, I can get paint down in every spot except right where the hole is that way. Looking pretty good. First chickadee. A lot of fun. Just for good measure, since this is very thin, and if this falls off the tree or something, I'm going to embed a piece of steel wire in the underside here to really strengthen that tail. I'm going to use this ruby bit, just a cylindrical bit, and use it kind of like an end mill and just cut a slot out here very carefully so I don't punch through the top of the tail. And then I've got a little piece of wire, and I'll cut that to length and put some bend in it so it follows that shape. All right, I got my little piece of wire bent so it'll lay in there nice and be embedded. Just gonna cover that then with the epoxy. I think it's the old decoy maker in me, wants to make sure things are strong and stand the test of time. All right, we've got the tail strengthened, and now an important thing that I didn't think about until now is I want to establish the hang point location so we get a nice balanced look. I tried multiple locations and came up with this one that puts the bird in a nice attitude hanging on the tree. Just another internet search to come up with something to as a hanger, and I wanted an eyelet like this, and these are only about 2 millimeters inside, diameter. And there's a pack of 200 for about $4 off of Amazon again. And I was able to just stick an awl in there just barely, and then push this into that soft tupelo. And when I'm done painting, I can just put a little epoxy on there. And I think it makes a nice hanging point option. Here's what they look like. So that's embedded about an inch into the tupelo. All right, that's gonna hang nice. Now let's get this guy painted. I'm gonna seal the bird with a couple of coats of Prolux semi-gloss wood finish. I'll let that dry between coats. Now I'm going to use Rust-Oleum primer, just gray primer, and give the bird a thin primer coat. And we'll be ready to paint. It's just a quick look at the bird. Pretty happy with that. All right, we got the bird carved, and thanks for humoring me on this project. I know this is a little out of the box, but part of what I'm trying to do is convey the fun of carving. And mixing it up, like I said in the start of the video, keeps things fresh so that you're just not doing the same thing all the time over and over again. And Christmas is coming, so I just wanted to do something for the season. I hope you enjoy it. Next time, we'll try to paint this bad boy. Talk to you then.